everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fuel for Thought. My name is Gráinne Earley, Director of Employee Experience at Fuel. And in this series, I meet the trailblazers and thought leaders shaping the future of employee experience. Together, we'll dive into emerging trends, cutting-edge strategies, and game-changing ideas, sharing insights and inspiration along the way. The goal? To spark new ways of thinking and give you some real fuel for thought in creating exceptional workplace experiences. Today, I'm joined by Danica Murphy, founder and director of PRISM, an internationally recognized expert in the area of executive coaching, high-performance team development, training and design, and facilitation and strategic development. In today's session, we're going to discuss the importance of leadership in employee experience and overall business success, including what leadership looks like in the future, the role of AI, and even some personal development and coaching tips. Welcome, Danica. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thanks very much for having me today.
Oh, it's great to have you. Do you want to kick off? We might start off by you just telling us a little bit about PRISM and why you set it up and kind of what led you to creating such a wonderful company.
A story I love to tell, actually, because it's very
Yeah.
close to my heart. I suppose my own leadership story kind of feeds into it a little bit. So I'm American by accent, as you can tell, but I'm an Irish evangelist. I love living in Ireland. It's been great to my family and I, but haven't always been here. So when I started my company 29 years ago, I moved from the States to here. But in the States, I was my first leadership role was at the age of 12. I had the very glamorous job of a paper courier, so
Nice.
Newspaper girl. And in those days, it was
I
very...
love that you call that a leadership job.
Absolutely.
I love it. It was, you've started the leadership journey very early on.
It absolutely was, because in those
Yeah.
days, there was a lot of responsibility to give to
Yeah.
a 12-year-old. You had to book a business. You had to go collect
Yeah.
$12 a month
Yeah.
from your customers, and you had to pay your distributor at the end of the month. So you had to manage the money, build the relationships. And through that, then got my first real job, which was then, I guess that was a real job, but got my job working in a pharmacy through babysitting. Anyway, lots of relationships.
Yeah.
But I suppose all those early things taught me that you don't do it alone. You have to have this support network around you, and you have to take chances. And so when I graduated with a degree in psychology and realized I didn't want to be a psychologist, not exactly good timing to realize those things. What I didn't want to be was a clinical psychologist, and my university quite specialized in that. Decided I wanted to help people really focus on making the most out of the place they spend the most time, which is at work.
Yeah.
So I figured I needed to learn about work. And so I went to Arthur Andersen in those days, that tells you how old I am, and became an accountant because that seemed like the most normal thing to do. Looking back, crazy. But anyway, I got into business consultancy and business advisory through my work as an accountant and an auditor there. And that provided me with a route to Ireland, a job offer after I married an Irishman in America.
Great.
And once I came here, then worked for this particular opportunity until I had the chance to go out on my own and start PRISM, which was really founded as a very bespoke, personalized leadership advisory service. And in those days, when I moved here, coaching was considered a bad word,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That was like therapy.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
you know, that many years ago, neither of those things were popular in Ireland.
Yeah.
So business advisory was the label, but it was really coaching.
Yeah. The word business being in it, it was like, oh, this is acceptable.
All of a
This
sudden
is- yeah,
acceptable.
Yeah.
And I think in those days, the American accent actually helped because you were coming with something new and fresh.
Yeah.
Now, after all these years here, I'm not sure that that's a good, banner to be wearing, but it did provide you with an entree into a new market.
Yeah, amazing. And there's so many different types of coaching and different products that PRISM offers. I think the two that kind of jumped out at me were about team development and team alignment, and then also leadership training and coaching in that way, because I think they kind of tie to some areas that I'm very passionate about in employee experience and what leadership brings to that area. Can you talk me through those kind of couple of areas that you work on?
Yeah, so I think for us, I like to use analogies. I think people are storytellers. You guys know that more than anybody. So I think the storytelling is really important. And I think when I think of leadership alignment, I like the visual of a rowboat. So if everyone's pulling in the same direction, and probably the easiest way to imagine it is, those scenes in a movie where they're not pulling in the same direction, and the boat always capsizes, and there's great laughter and people splashing around the water.
Yeah.
That's great for a movie, but it's not actually how you want your employee experience or your working experience or your client experience to be. You want it a lot more streamlined, a lot more seamless. So if I think of that rowing analogy, in the 2015 Polish, it was held in Poland, the national rowing competitions, the single rower that broke the world record broke it at 6 minutes and 30 seconds. The team, the single rowers from New Zealand, the team was then from Germany. They got on the boat. The conditions must have been fabulous on this particular day because they broke a world record as well. And they did it in 5 minutes and 13 seconds. So a team all pulling together in the same direction goes faster and can achieve greater results than an individual. So for me, that's what team alignment is all about. It's especially around leadership teams, getting them all rowing in the same direction. Now, I can imagine that for that team, they had to spend a lot more time preparing together, getting coached together, practicing together than an individual. But again, it's borne out in the results. So for us, team alignment, it's just about getting everyone on the best seat in the boat for them and making sure that everyone's rowing in the same direction. Likewise with the coaching, I think people can think of coaching as a lot of different things, but in our world, what we really try and help organizations with is any rowing team, any world-class athlete has a coach.
Yeah.
They don't row the boat for them, but they make them the best rower that they can be. And I think that's really for us what coaching is. It's not leading for you or in any way being a crutch. It's about helping you unlock something that's going to allow you to be the best leader that you can be. And I believe personally, like leadership at every level.
Yeah.
So you're always leading thought.
Yeah.
Whether it's because you're an influencer or because you are passionate about something or really steeped in some knowledge, I think you're always leading thought. And so knowing your voice in that and having the confidence to do that, that's coaching can help with that a lot.
And I love that you say it's for each level and it's for each individual.
Everybody.
Everyone, like you were saying in your first job, it was a leadership role, and everyone, no matter what level they're at in the company, needs to take on that onus of leading and leading by example and being a team player and pulling the boat together, which is amazing.
And I think what happens a lot of times is we abdicate that. We say, oh, nobody reports to me, so I'm not a leader. But I don't actually define leadership that way. I think leadership is the ability, with or without authority, to lead thought.
Yeah.
And sometimes that just means knowing what's in my control, what's the behavior I'm going to model. Am I going to be kind?
Yeah.
Am I going to call something out that I don't agree with in a constructive way? That's leading.
Yeah, and it's inspiring. It's to inspire people, whether you have, like you say, people reporting into you or not. It's inspiring people in the workplace.
Absolutely. Yeah. So we do a lot of coaching, we do a lot of team alignment, and then we do a lot around the skill build to enable those two things. So if I'm getting coached and I want to unlock something, maybe I need some training in something like feedback skills, for example. Yeah. Maybe I want to be better at that, more confident, more comfortable. Great, I can get some training in that. And then maybe I can work with my leadership team to align on what does good look like around here. Mm-hmm. And if we all agree that, and we've got some skills around feedback, then we can all give each other feedback to help us move the needle closer to that definition of good. So that's kind of how they fit together.
Yeah, I love it. And in the employee experience space, we're working with a lot of leaders and a lot of, people and culture managers and a lot of HR divisions. And I think an area that we find is difficult is sometimes that buy-in from leadership. So there may be the idea of this is how we should row the boat, but then there's people in a different department that are looking at the employees, and what the employee is experiencing may be slightly different from what the leaders think where the boat needs to be rowed, or what the business needs. So in terms of trying to align them and look at how to get leadership buy-in, I suppose, for things like that, have you any kind of experience in that area?
Yeah, that's actually the work I love the most, because
brilliant.
I find most people have a really strong intention, particularly leaders in a business place. They want to do good.
Yeah.
The challenge is that we assume that my definition of good is the same as yours. And you know that lovely old phrase, what happens when you assume, I won't say it now, but all kinds of things happen then. So I think the first thing about getting leaders aligned, it's a listening exercise. Mm-hmm. And, it used to be the old SWOT model. You identify your strengths, your weaknesses, your opportunities, and your threats. And does everyone align on those? Does everyone think they're the same? We've kind of moved away from that. We just think the world is complicated. Mm-hmm. And we're much better focusing on the art of the possible. And so really getting leaders to articulate and narrate, tell the story of what they think the strengths, opportunities, aspirations, and results are for their organization. Yeah. More often than not, what happens is when we get to results, they just have a different definition of what does good look like. Yeah. So for one division, it might be, or one leader even, it might be more clients. For another one, it might be fewer clients, better quality. Mm-hmm. For another group, it might be more employees, bigger teams. These are all conflicting in some way. And so you have to get that leadership team to talk about what is that, that old word, the balanced scorecard, or what does it really look like when this organization is living its best version of itself.
Yeah.
So we do a lot of listening, we define that current state, and then we make sure that the organization has a story that each leader can live in their division. The hardest part around that, honestly, is making sure that there's a shared result, an enterprise result, not an ego result.
Yeah.
It's really compelling to win. Like, I want my function or my team to get the most budget, to get the most accolade, to get the biggest, applause.
Yeah, and that's where things are fighting against each other, and the best result isn't coming out.
Patrick Lencioni does a great bit of work on a book called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and he really talks about the trust. Yeah. And you have to have enough trust to have the conversation about results.
Yeah.
And the results have to be enterprise-wide at a certain level, because otherwise you're absolutely going to accidentally throw each other off the boat, if we're going to stay with that rowing analogy.
Yeah. Yeah, I love it.
But I think that's fun work. Because when you unlock it and when you get there, it's this resurgence of energy for leaders, and they kind of go, oh, this is what I love.
Yeah.
Doing and being.
And it's so important to have that energy at that level as well, and have the leadership really
100%.
demonstrating that. I mean, I read something recently, I think it was a Gallup report, where it was 70% of how your employees are engaged is resting on how the leadership and how the manager is working with those employees. And I just thought that was huge. I mean, that there could be 1 or 2 or 3 leaders maybe in a business that are affecting huge teams to that level, which I just thought was absolutely massive. Whereas, if you're working from the top and you're working at leadership and you're being inspiring and you're teaching everyone to row in the same direction, then you're inspiring everyone underneath, and suddenly everything kind of opens up and unlocks, which I think is amazing.
It was really interesting. I was working with someone in a coaching situation, and I was suggesting that, they cast a shadow. When you walk into a room, a leader, whether you chose it or not, and most of them didn't, by the way, but whether you like it or not, and most of them don't always like it, but every single time you walk through the main office, you cast a shadow. And if your shadow is long and dark that day, maybe someone cut you off on the car ride in, maybe nobody could find their shoes that morning, and it was one of those mornings. But when you walk in the office with that as a leader, you set a tone.
Yeah.
And immediately, because we are creatures, we are still quite low base brain creatures sometimes, we fill in the gaps. And so our fight-flight mechanism says, oh my gosh, she walked in really bad form. Yeah. Maybe there's going to be budget cuts.
Yeah.
Maybe my job is on the line, particularly with all the uncertainty going on. Yeah. When in actual fact, you were just annoyed your kids couldn't find their shoes.
Yeah,
so this shadow gets cast. I think leaders really have to remember that they control that shadow. Mm-hmm. And so to really manage the length and width of the shadow, and just to be able to also own it sometimes, to go, I'm not my best self today.
Yeah.
Something's going on in the background, gang. Thanks for, pulling the weight for me a little bit today. I really appreciate it. I think that's very human. You know?
And I think it's that head down, head up kind of piece, where you're coming into the office, and if the head is down and people are starting to jump to their own conclusions, or they're thinking, oh, I won't approach her on that today because it doesn't seem like she's open to discussion. Whereas if the head is up when you're coming in the office and you're saying hello and you're greeting everyone, suddenly it opens up that area for collaboration and for approaching you about projects. And I think it brings a much more unified approach as well for the leader and for the employee.
And you mentioned a really good point there around that kind of, approachable. And I think no one is in a good mood all the time. Yeah. And no one should be held to that account. That's that kind of toxic positivity type thing. Yeah. And I also think that leaders set the tone for people being able to say, are you okay? Mm. So if I think of Satya Nadella, who, he took over Microsoft when it was in decline. And one of the things, he walked in and did a little listening exercise, and he says, okay, we need to switch from a know-it-all organization to a learn-it-all organization. So at the very top, he said to leaders, we need to set a tone that we don't know everything. Yeah. And by doing so, really created this idea of growth mindset. So if growth mindset says we can always be better, every day we can be better. So I wake up every morning, I challenge myself with my own personal brand, which is, to bring energy, value, and growth into every room. And I go, did I? Will I? Can I? How can I do it even better? I bet tomorrow I could be 1% better. Yeah. If leaders set that tone, and a leader comes in and they're not their best self that day, then someone in their team has the safety to approach them and go, you don't seem yourself? Is everything okay? What's going on? Anything I can help with? And then when the leader says, oh, home stuff, or just annoyed, someone cut me off, then all of a sudden, it creates that space and relief. But leaders absolutely set the tone with their desire to continue to grow and be open in that space, I think.
And I think vulnerability can be your superpower. And I know that's something that I've struggled with myself in trying to understand the balance of how much vulnerability is good in a leadership role and how much do I need to keep, to protect my team from, because obviously you don't want to be completely transparent about everything that's going on in your life. But like you say, a certain amount of vulnerability when you're saying, look, I'm not at my best today. I might not be in the right mindset to take this in properly today. Can we look at this again tomorrow? You've done amazing work. It's not sticking with me today. So I just need the evening to think about it or something. It's that transparency, that vulnerability of saying, I amn't perfect. Like you say, I don't know it all. I'm trying my best. And it's, I want to work with you on this and just give me a moment now and let's work on this together, I think is really key.
I think there's been a lot of research on that piece. So you can call it vulnerability or whatever, kind of openness or fallibility, whatever the thing is. But the term that a lot of organizations use it's a dynamic, actually, and it's called psychological safety.
Yes.
And a lot of leaders confuse psychological safety with being nice. So psychological safety is not being nice. It's having the kind of environment where there's a dynamic of honesty and candor and trust where people can go, you're not yourself. Or I don't understand how we made that decision. Or I think we made a mistake here. We being me, we being you, but it's the ability to hold the standards really high. So if I'm not myself today, I'm letting the standards down. I am not myself, and we need everyone to stay focused on the clarity of the task in front of them. So it's having the psychological safety to go, we're all going to make mistakes. When we do make a mistake, let's fix it together first. Let's figure out later how we can prevent it from happening again. But every question, every challenge is welcomed. And it doesn't mean just kind of letting things go slack or not holding the standards high. We have really high standards. We want to win that race. And to win that race, we have to be at our best, which means when someone isn't, we have to be able to go, what happened there? How do we prevent that from happening again? And I think leaders absolutely set that tone.
And I think looking to the future in terms of leadership, something that I am hearing so much about at the moment is, AI and the panic of AI and human versus machine and all of that kind of thing. But I heard something really interesting the other day when I was chatting to someone about it, and they said, you're never going to take the human element from the role. So yes, AI is going to come in and maybe it's going to support you with your tasks, and maybe it's going to support, the company with certain elements, but it'll never take that human element away. So the skills that we really need to be developing are our human skills, our leadership skills, our management skills. It's those elements in the workplace that are going to matter going forward, because technology keeps coming and it's going to keep bringing amazing things with it, but it's never going to replace what we can deliver as leaders or as managers or as teammates, in a company.
Yeah, I think it's such a tricky place because I think the whole technology arena falls under the VUCA uncertain. I'm uncertain and I'm scared, because what we don't understand and what we don't know scares us as humans, because we don't actually like to walk around blind corners. It's a threat. So we fight, flight, all that kind of stuff. I think I'm not even confident sitting here saying that I know what technology will and won't replace. I think the only thing that I can do as a leader is create an environment where we have genuine curiosity. Where we're always going, what if? What if it did replace me? What could I do then? What if it does replace this function? What could we rechannel, repurpose that for? What would that bring to our clients, to our services? What would that bring to the market? If we've got a protectionist mindset, that scarcity principle that you see so often, I just don't think that's going to create curiosity, and that's going to inhibit innovation. And I think then innovation will be the kind of spoils of a small few, as opposed to accessible to all organizations. So I really think that growth mindset and psychological safety kind of are the underpins of innovation and curiosity, and going, wow, I never saw this one coming. What could we do with this? And you only need to look at certain industries, like the legal firm struggles a little bit with that, because a lot of the services that might normally be provided in a legal capacity, AI can write some of those contracts and do all that. So there's one element that could be like, what is this going to do to our client stream? Where on the other side going, wow, does that free us up to do something different? And where's the human value add in that? And probably one of you mentioned like skills. One of the big places that we see is I actually did an experiment because we do a lot of negotiation and presentation training. And negotiation training is fantastic because you can put a conundrum into AI and you can say, give me the key negotiation points or the banners or whatever words you want to use. And it spits out this fantastic outline. You go in to actually negotiate with someone and that's out the window.
Yeah, you don't know what they're going to throw back at you. It's
the only way to learn negotiation is to be in the room. Watching, listening, looking for body language and learning. So it's a real kind of almost apprenticeship type thing. And yet we're so focused at the moment on productivity that we're like, oh, well, let's just have as few people in the room. Let's not, for our utilization, we don't want too many people in the room. How are they going to learn that then? So, and someone was saying, well, I think their AI system and your AI system will come together and negotiate the answer. And I was like, there's too much ego in us. We're not gonna let a machine do that. I don't think so. I don't know how it all goes, but I don't think it's man versus machine. I think it's man and machine.
I agree.
And I think machine is the enabler, but I think humans will always be the artisans or the craftsmen.
I think it has to be that collaboration piece. Like I know there's AI tools that I use that make my day so much easier. Some of the mundane tasks that I maybe don't want to spend my time on, I'm like, fantastic, I can get support on that. And then I have time to maybe do more of the creative things that are getting my juices flowing, that are making me think differently, that are bringing innovation into the team, so that I'm thinking differently when I'm approaching the team instead of coming to them going, oh God, I've just spent 4 hours on that document. When, so it's that collaboration of, like you say, it's not man versus machine. It's the collaboration of how do we utilize those tools and how, what can they do for us, but also then what can we do instead when we have that time?
There was an author, Jacob Morgan, who during pandemic published a book. He interviewed 500 leaders of Fortune 500 companies, and he started to really capture what are the leadership capabilities of the future and the mindsets of leaders. And I don't remember all of them. It's a great read. It's a super easy read. But 2 of them that really stuck in is one is leader as Yoda. So being able to be wise, which means kind of being calm and setting that shadow. But the second one he used, which really sang to me during pandemic with my own company, is technology like a teenager. And, when pandemic hit and I had a business that was entirely client facing, I had absolutely resisted the whole online. Zoom had come around, Microsoft Teams just getting started. I was a resistor. I was like, that'll never replace us or be part of our thing. Probably because I was just scared and tired and really didn't want to take it on. Pandemic hit and I had just finished that book that I mentioned there, and I said, technology, what would a teenager do? A teenager would figure it out. They'd get a bunch of friends around and they'd hack it. They'd figure it out. So the first thing I did is I hired 2 grad students to train all of the old fogies, me, how do you do this technology and just beat us into it, get us into it. And like we were an early adopter and we were an innovator in that whole space and became well known pretty quickly as people who could make that online space fun because there was an element of youth in it as opposed to resistance, which my natural, and I think that's another thing about leaders, you have to know what you're fighting against to be able to identify the antidote. And I was definitely fighting against just, I just don't want to, but the technology as a teenager kind of kicked me into gear and got it going.
I love the idea of that. Like, because I think with leaders as well, like, I don't know, do you find this with some of the executive coaching that you're doing, that there is that resistance for change, and this is how it was done in the old days, and this is, I'd say that's probably one of the bigger challenges, is to get people to think like teenagers and to think with new technology coming in now to be able to utilize that and to think differently, I suppose, in their leadership. Is that something that you're coming across all the time?
100%. And it's funny how you start to hear it. So when I first became an auditor, we didn't have laptops. We had what were called portable computers. Well, they were no more portable than like one of those big trunks you take on a ship, But I was the youngest person on the team, and so my job was to lug this thing around on a luggage trolley. And I remember going into one of the senior partners' offices, this beautiful mahogany desk overlooking, the bay in San Francisco. And he was going, oh, great that you're bringing that thing around with you, but one of those will never sit on this desk. This is a desk where deals are made.
Right.
And I remember going, thou doth protest too loudly. And then we started hearing it again before the pandemic. We started hearing people use language, leaders using language like snowflake.
Yes. Yeah.
And a real kind of negative connotation to challenging boundaries, thinking about work-life balance, thinking about progression and development. And I remember leaders at the time going, those snowflakes, we just need to get them in here and we'll knock the edges off of them or whatever. And it was the exact same moment. It was like I was standing in that senior partner's office and I was going, thou doth protest too loudly. We need to be listening to this. Something is going to change.
Yeah.
And then I think pandemic happened. It was an accelerator.
Yeah.
And it really made a lot of leaders look at the way they resist the same ways I was resisting technology, the way that they're resisting change and change in the way we do things. Because the way we do things is known and comfortable. And it served us, those of us who like are my age, and I'm not telling you my age, but old enough, you know, the way we've worked has served us really well.
Yeah.
And it's maybe not going to, it's not fit for purpose anymore. Yeah. But change is hard. Change is painful and it's scary. And that goes back to your vulnerability piece. Being able to say, I don't know how we're going to work this out, but we need to work this out.
Yeah. And you need to scare yourself a little bit every day.
Oh,
you need that uncomfortable, like, it's lovely sitting in a place where you're like, God, I know everything. This is wonderful. But like, you have to change and you have to evolve. It gets boring otherwise. You know, you have to be looking at what is the next thing, what is the next exciting piece that we want to get stuck into, what are the new challenges that I can put before myself, you know. And I think that is, for leadership to evolve, that's the most important thing, is to be always looking to change and always looking to evolve.
And that's really the thing about coaching. And I know when you and I were speaking earlier, we were talking about coaching being, you know, is it a progressive or remedial type of thing? And I don't think people who seek coaching are in a remedial situation. It's not the kind of coaching that we do anyway, because I think coaching is always about more, better. How can I grow? How can I improve myself? And I always use the example of, is it Brainsford, the cycling coach for the Olympic UK cycling coach, who had that 1% increment? You know, if you can make the bike go 1% faster, you know, over 10 people, that's 10% or whatever. So I think leaders that really take on that coaching, they want to try and find that little edge, that 1%. Maybe it's communicating 1% better. Maybe it's clarity. Maybe it's better way of working. It could be anything across the spectrum. But they're like, if I nailed that, what would that feel like? Yeah. You know, maybe I'd place different in the race. How would that experience, you know, serve others? And I think that's really, for me, where the fun of coaching comes in, is watching the light bulb go on and going, that's it, that's my 1%. Yeah. And I love that.
And 1% is so achievable. Instead of saying, I have to change it all, I need coaching to fix it all, you know, it's no, just 1% and progression. And do you think, I'm a huge fan of coaching and mentorship and therapy and girlfriends and anyone that I can talk things out with and, you know, feel like I'm learning from a personal side of things or from a work side. So do you feel that shift is changing in people's mindsets now? They're not seeing coaching as this is a problem we need to fix, or, you know, this skill set isn't there, we need to sort that. And they're now seeing it as something that's, you know, embedded in, you know, growth and continuous growth.
Yeah. And even more so, what I think it's become a retention tool. So I think organizations are using it as a privilege. So we see potential in you. Yes. We want to help you grow. The best form, you know, we're in this kind of industry 5.0, everything is about personalization. The most personalized learning you can give to someone or offer someone is coaching. So there was a study that was done, I think it was at Stanford, and it was picked up by Boston Consulting Group, and they found that if leaders participated in a leadership development program, they tended to improve their leadership effectiveness on whatever metrics they were measured by about 22 to 23%. If they were given coaching over the same period of time, so let's call it a 6-month program, for example, their levels of stakeholder reporting around leadership effectiveness went up 88%. Wow. That's a big jump. Huge. Because it's personalized. It's all about you. What's your blocker? What's your potential? What's your 1%? It's going to be different than mine. So we might discover some of that together, but really unlocking mine, you know, it's just like shedding the harness. Like let me run then. And so I think coaching is seen as a retention tool. It's seen as a leadership development opportunity and privilege. The language and the narrative has completely changed.
Yeah, amazing.
Certainly in the last 15 years.
Yeah. Amazing. I'm delighted that coaching is going that way and that there is so much more personal coaching, I think, going on, as well as people doing it in business. I know, do you find that with PRISM, you're obviously working with huge companies as well, but there's an awful lot of personalized coaching that you're doing too?
Yeah, and I'll pick up on that and mention one other thing that you mentioned a minute ago or a little while ago was around, you know, therapy, coaching, mentorship. These are really different things. Yes. And I think the most important thing around the coaching is to know what's the purpose. So coaching is a very personal thing. And I think in this industry 5.0, it's where it's all about personalization. It's really, it has to be very personal. And the challenge with coaching, and there are a lot of really good coaching organizations and individuals in Ireland. We're very lucky. We have a very high standard here, actually. But the challenge is that it's usually an organization or a business that's paying
Yes.
for the coaching. And anyone who's worth their salt in coaching recognizes that, but has very clear boundaries around who's the client. In coaching, the client is the coachee. So if you and I were coaching, regardless of who's paying for it, this is where the confidentiality lies. And I think when it's related to an overall organizational initiative, for example, if you were going through a large leadership development program and there was a coaching element to it, the coaching is personal and private to you. And yet as a coach, I can try and challenge you on themes that are present in the program or important to the organization to grow. So maybe this organization is saying we need to be a lot bolder. That's one of our big things. We need to be bolder in the marketplace. Bold. How does that translate to you as a leader? Are you bold? How can you unlock that? Is that something you want to access? So whether it's between you and I and it's private and confidential, it can still be in service to what the organization is doing. But that feedback loop is truncated. Nothing from the coaching conversation goes back to the organizations, apart from maybe agreed themes. So a lot of times we would coach with organizations and we would accumulate with the coaches, what are some key themes you're hearing from all the people you're coaching in that organization? Feed those back to the organization. That can be very valuable because it might inform their training or development. But so it is different than therapy. Therapy is valuable for people, for so many people. And therapy can often be a lot about looking back and what got you here. And for me, coaching is about here you are, what's going to get you there. It's very forward focused, and it doesn't always address some of maybe the key issues that need to be addressed. But oftentimes through coaching, people might say, I think I need to go backwards and look at some of that other stuff. And a good coach will always direct someone then, or to say, listen, I think that's a different thing. Find a good therapist, get a good counselor, whatever's required. But I would say probably in 85% of the coaching that I've been engaged in over the last 25 years, it's purely stayed in the coaching arena, and it's all about the professional stretch, that extra 1%, and being a better version as a leader of myself.
And I think in employee experience, I'm so passionate about what can we do for the employee and what is going to help their day-to-day. What is their day-to-day and what is the struggles that they're having and how can we support that? And I think looking at coaching and leadership styles and things like that as a whole piece that sometimes gets ignored. It's like, oh, well, that's not in the employee arena. That's the leadership arena. And it's like, no, we're all, going back to the boat analogy, we're all one team, and the benefits 100%. Of leadership teams or management teams or employees themselves getting coaching and going through this process is going to then in turn have a great return for the company themselves. It's all in the one package.
And the one place that I probably heard that story best was I was coaching someone about 1 billion years ago. I think it was early on in my coaching career here in Ireland. And I was coaching a few people actually, and these two leaders, I'm using the word leader, they were mid-level managers, but they both had huge potential, and they both came to me with very different current states. One of them was just completely energized. How do I do more? How do I bring more people on? How do I spread energy and aspiration and think about my next role? There was a huge level of positivity and potential. And the other individual, kind of same age profile, same level, was just like, how do I get through this? How do I make it till 55? Because it was kind of 55. You can kind of look at, how am I going to get through this till the end? Because I'm just so tired. The word burnt out wasn't used in those days, but it was like, I'm just exhausted. When we really started to dig through some of the stories, in both cases, they'd had very different development tracks. So in one case, it was very much do. There had been no mentorship. There had been no coaching. There had been no thought around my personal brand. Who am I? What do I stand for? How do I align my values? It had just been do more. Do
just
more.
Get it done.
It's a story of limiting returns. I mean, you can do more, but you can't keep running around the track. Eventually, you're going to collapse. Whereas the other leader, who was all jizzed up, had a mentor that kind of, took them off the busyness every now and again and kind of challenged them, like, well, who are you being while you're doing? And then they said, we think you should see a coach. Might really help you unlock what your real leadership style and potential is. So this person was just dying to apply it. How do I apply it? How do I do more? And that always really stuck with me, because I think a career is a long game. And you're supposed to have fun at a game. It's supposed to be fun. Not every day. But on the whole, when you look back over a life well lived or a career well lived, I think my own aspiration, and that's why I got into this field, is I want people to look back and go, he was pretty good. It was pretty darn good. And it was fun. Because if there's no fun, I remember the book, there's no fun and there's no profit. What are you doing? How is this going to work for you in the long game? So I think there is that piece that coaching can help unlock for people.
Yeah. And I love that idea of a challenge. I used to always say to people, row with me. Like, I love a debate. It's not a real row. I love a debate. I'm like, challenge me. Like, this is the event I might be producing, or this is the creative idea I have. Challenge me, push me to be better. And I think in our careers, as well as in projects and with our colleagues, we should always be pushing each other. I always say, like, have a row. Like, let's debate this out, and really push each other because with that collaboration piece, we're all pushing each other to do better and to be better. And, as you can see with those two examples that you've just shared, someone who was being challenged by their mentor and being asked the difficult questions and being told to kind of do some self-realization and some looking at how they're approaching things, was striving from that process than someone who was left alone to just do.
And I think the one maybe assumption that you've made, and that really comes clear in your passion around this area and what you must, I would read that as you have an environment that has a lot of trust in it.
Yeah, we do.
Trust is where, if you don't have trust, you can't have robust debates.
Yeah.
Because you're just worried that someone's going to be sarcastic, make you look foolish, embarrass you, throw you under the bus. If there's no trust, there is no debate. And I'll just reference back to that Lencioni book that I mentioned, that Patrick Lencioni book. The pyramid, it's good, healthy debate is built on a foundation of trust. If you don't have debate, you can't really have commitment, because there's always some dark little question in your head. And if you don't have a chance to, should I, can I, what if?
Yeah.
And if you don't get a chance to air that, then it lives with you later as, I told you so. It comes back later because you didn't have debate. Exactly. So I think that what we do with organizations when we try and do that alignment piece is we really try and gauge the level of trust that exists. And how do we move the needle on that before we do anything, before we talk about anything else?
It's that psychological safety piece that we talked about 100%. Earlier. It's like feeling safe enough. Yeah.
And it's interesting because trust is what lives between two people. I trust you, you trust me because of the way you behave or the things you say. But psychological safety is the dynamic when we all trust each other. And so trust is a component, but it's kind of even a harder bar to reach.
Yeah. And especially in a big organization and where there's so many different dynamics at play.
Yep, absolutely. And it is tricky. And well, the good news is that no one's quite figured it out yet, which means there's lots of work for organizations like mine to help people engage in the conversation. But I think there's a lot of people out there now more than ever, probably because of all the uncertainty in the world and this desire to get more out of this professional experience. There's a lot of people having the conversation. There's a lot of people talking about it. A lot of people willing to invest in unlocking it, in trying to bring people into that little zone of discomfort to have the conversations in a safe way. But I think it's really moved tremendously fast in terms of that whole development piece. Again, from when I moved to Ireland all those years ago, nobody was talking about this stuff.
Yeah. And I think even in the last few years, obviously you talked about the accelerant of COVID and all of that. Like I think in the last few years, because there has been so much chaos and there has been so much change, it has given people the opportunity to lean into some of that scary stuff and to really push the boundaries as well, which I think has been a good positive.
And change is the name of the game. That's the number one conversation we're being asked to help organizations with, is help our people not to change. Help our people feel resilient and confident in change. Because we don't know what the next change is going to be. And we're not even sure we've defined the current change, but we know that there's a next one coming. And so this idea around, what makes a future fit leader, it's resilience. And it's having the foundation to accelerate in all of that. And those two things only come when you're all in the boat rowing in the same direction. So that's why that analogy tends to work really well for me.
Amazing. I think I could sit here and talk for hours. This has been great. Is there anything, I suppose, before you wrap up, any little thoughts or nuggets you'd like to leave anyone listening with, about the future of the workplace and, leadership, or maybe something they're thinking about, on their personal journey?
I suppose maybe nothing quite as exact as that, but something maybe a little more philosophical, because it's what kind of keeps me going and what brings me into every room in the leaders that I work with is it's a quote by David Irving, who worked on a really interesting project called the Authentic Leadership Project. He's got a few really nice videos, but he's got one quote that always sings to me, and that I think if I leave that with everyone that I coach, it's really important. It's that being a good leader is synonymous with being a good human. It's that simple, and it's that hard. And I just think, you know, there is no separation between being kind and being good and holding standards and being able to say that's not acceptable.
Yeah.
Caring for the individual and holding the standards high, I think is really a very good human thing.
Yeah.
And I think if we did that as leaders, we'd all be doing a little bit better. So that's what I'd like to leave everybody with.
I love it. That's amazing. Danica, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
It's been such a pleasure.
I always love being in your space. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Amazing.
Take care.